Good evening, boys and girls. Today I want us to go through what we call we compare the Kenyan government and the Swaziland government on how it is being composed nowadays or today. And I want us to go to the content of the day, the present system of government in Kenya and Swaziland. The system of government in Swaziland, as we know very well, this is the kingdom which was founded in the southern part of Africa in the year 1830s by the King Sobusa I, the way you can see in our screen today. The Swaziland government, or a monarch, was founded by King Sobusa I in 1830s. Then the Swaziland became a British protectorate during the scramble for and the petitioning of Africa. However, the king was allowed to continue ruling through the traditional systems of government. The Swaziland attained its independence in 1968 under the leadership of the King Sobusa II. So the founder was King Sobusa I, and in 1968 Swaziland attained independence through the leadership of the King Sobusa II. He was succeeded by the King Mswati III, who was crowned the king in 1986. You can see here my typed notes that the Swaziland became a British protectorate during the period of the scramble for and the petitioning of Africa. Then the king was allowed to continue ruling the government through a traditional system. So the Swaziland under the king under the King Sobusa II, who led it into independence. Then later he was succeeded by the man that you are seeing in the screen by the name the King Mswati III, who was crowned the king in 1986. Then Swaziland is ruled by a king, and we say that the king, the position of the king is hereditary, means that it was being inherited from the family member. And I remember informing my learners that the hereditary kind of inheritance in Swaziland was based on the matrilineal. The matrilineal, it's when the king was being succeeded by the nephew. The title of the king in Swaziland was known as Ngwenyama. That was the title that he was given. Ngwenyama meant the lion. And Swaziland is ruled through a traditional system of government called Tingundra. So Tingundra was a traditional system of government which was being used by the King Mswati III of 1986 in Swaziland. Then later, the king now takes the head of the state, and the country had a prime minister who was appointed by the king. So the king could not administer in Swaziland alone. He needed to appoint a prime minister to help him in administration. The prime minister is the head of the government. That one, boys and girls, you must note it down. The prime minister is the head of the government in Swaziland, not the king. And the prime minister makes recommendations to the king on whom to choose or to appoint to the cabinet. The king is assisted by the Swazi National Council, known as Likoko, appointed by the king. Remember, the Likoko Swazi National Council, or the Swazi National Council, known as Likoko, were appointed through the advisory of the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister in this case was the head of the government. The king is assisted by the queen or the queen mother, known as Indrovukazi. Indrovukazi was the queen mother in Swaziland government. Is one of the advisories of the king. So if we say that in Kenya, the advisor of the president is the Attorney General, then in Swaziland, the advisor of the king was the Indrovukazi, the queen mother. The Swazi parliament is made up of two houses. These are the Senate. Some of the members of the Senate are appointed by the king, while others are elected by electoral college. This means that leaders are elected by a small number of representatives. Then we add the House of the Assembly. Some members of this assembly are appointed by the king. Most of them were members were elected by electoral college. The country had a traditional court under the chiefs. So they were using the traditional judicial system. There is a civil service which implements government policies and helps in administering the country. Same likes to Kenya. The civil service, all the civil servants in Kenya, they help the government in implementing the government policies of the nation. Before I proceed, I want us to do a recap of what we have done. We have said that the king was founded in 1830s by the King Sobusa I, and the kingdom is found in the southern part of Africa. And please note that Swaziland is a landlocked country that borders Mozambique to the east and South Africa to the north, west, and the south. Now, the Swaziland became a British protectorate when the country started fighting for their independence. So the British took over and declared Swaziland a British protectorate, but the king was allowed to continue ruling through the traditional system of government. But the Swaziland attained its independence in 1968 under the leadership of the King Sobusa II. He was succeeded by the King Sobusa III, who was crowned the king in 1986. Then Swaziland is ruled by a king. The position of the king is hereditary, of course matrilineal, where the king was being succeeded by the nephew. The title of the king is Ngwenyama, meant the lion. They believe that the Ngwenyama was a very strong and brave leader, and that's why he was given the name Ngwenyama. The Swaziland is ruled through a traditional system of government called Ntingundra, don't forget that one, and the king is the head of state. But the country has a prime minister who is appointed by the king, and the prime minister is the head of the government. The prime minister makes recommendations to the king on whom to be appointed to the cabinet. So without the advisor of the prime minister, you could not be appointed as the cabinet among the Swaziland government. Then also we had the Swazi National Council, known as Likoko, appointed by the king. The queen mother, Indrovukazi, is the one who advises the king. So I've said that if it was Kenya, we have the Attorney General. The one who advises the government in Kenya is the Attorney General. But now you can see the Indrovukazi, the Queen Mother, advising the king in Swaziland. The government of Swaziland had the traditional system of government. Tingundra in Swaziland had two houses, the Senate and the House Assembly. Some of the members in the Senate were appointed by the king, others elected by electoral college. And the House of Assembly, some members are appointed by the king, and most of the members are elected by electoral college. So, the country has traditional courts and the chiefs, and the civil servant assisted him, or the king Mswati, the one who was seeing the picture, to administer or to implement the government policies. We have similarities and differences in the Swaziland, the system of government in Kenya and Swaziland. Both the king of Swaziland and the president of Kenya are heads of states and government, of course, yes, that's the similarities. And the president in Kenya and the king of the Swaziland are commanders-in-chief of the armed forces. So these are the two similarities that we have. We have so many. Those are a few examples that I'm giving here. A few examples. Then we have what you call differences between the Swaziland government and the Kenyan government. The Swaziland is a kingdom headed by a hereditary king. Kenya is a republic headed by the elected president. The government consists of the king, the national council, and the parliament. Those are the three arms of the Swaziland: the king, the national council, and the parliament. And in Kenya, we have three arms: the executive, parliament, and the judiciary. Remember, in Kenya, executive is under the president, and the main work of the executive is to implement the government policies and the projects. And the parliament is to make laws and amend. Judiciary is to administer or to interpret the laws of the country. Parliament consists of two houses, the Senate and the House Assembly. Parliament consists of one house. This is wrong. Parliament in Kenya consists of the two houses. We have the Senate and the national. So the point number 3 under Kenya is very wrong. Parliament in Kenya consists of two houses. The so-called the binational government of two houses, like in the. So answer the point number 3 is not a difference. Point number 3 is a similarity. The parliament consists of the two houses, the Senate and the National Assembly, of course. And again in Kenya, parliament consists of the legislature consists of two houses, the Senate and the National Assembly. And in Kenya, boys and girls, the Senate are the upper house and the National Assembly the lower house. Membership to parliament in Swaziland is by appointment by the king and election, of course, electoral college. And the members of the parliament in Kenya are elected and some are nominated. So in Kenya, nobody is being appointed. There is no appointment to parliament, but the appointment comes under the ministries or the cabinet secretaries. But in parliament, one is elected by the members, also nominated by political parties in Kenya. There is no political parties in the Swaziland, of course, yes, and in Kenya, there are so many political parties. The party of the presidential candidate who wins the majority of the votes during the election forms the government, and the one who loses forms the opposition party. And there is no general elections in Swaziland. We have them after every 5 years. And in Kenya, we have elections after every 5 years. So the point number 6 sounds to be a similarity, not a difference. Then the king rules until he dies. In Kenya, the president rules for a maximum of only 2 terms of 5 years each, as stated by the Kenyan Constitution. The Kenyan Constitution. So a few questions down that I would like learners to have them for today. The questions are: number 1, state one similarity in the system of government in Kenya and the Swaziland. For this case now, I'll tell learners that state 3, point number 1, question number 1, state 3 similarities in the system of government in Kenya and Swaziland. And question number 2, state 5 differences between the system of government in Swaziland and in Kenya. State 5 differences between the system of government in Kenya and Swaziland. For those few remarks, boys and girls who are listening to me and watching, I wish you well as we prepare for the national exams this year. Please keep on revising. This is your year. We have no another year. You trace your time well so that you can achieve the highest marks ever that you have never achieved. So I wish you well. Let us meet tomorrow for the next lesson. Please attempt those questions with a lot of seriousness. Thank you very much. May God bless you. Shalom. Shalom.